Many companies that dove headfirst into the generative AI pool are now discovering that the money flow is starting to slow down. Is this the start of a new phase in the world of generative AI, or is this just a momentary pause while companies decide on their most valuable projects? Coming up on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me to discuss AI investments and other things generative AI is Mike Sinoway. He is the CEO of Lucidworks. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, Keith, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and so your company had a lot of interesting results from a couple of studies that you guys did about how companies feel about AI in 2024. And a lot of the results show that most companies are not going to spend as much this year or next year, and many are delaying, moving to production. We've also seen a lot of stories recently about this AI bubble about to burst, and I think that we're now entering a new phase in how companies are discovering AI. So from that survey that you guys did, the biggest stat that jumped out to me was that the cost and financial concerns of companies that are looking to deploy AI, while 63% said that they were increasing AI spending in the future, this was down 93% in your 2023 survey. And in addition, you found a 14x increase in the number of companies that were concerned about the cost. So when you add this all up, where do you think this money faucet is? Is it completely off? Is it starting to slow down? Are we at a trickle? Like, what's going on here?
The faucet's starting to be tightened down ever so slowly, I would say. There's a lot of discussion now about the hype is over, the bubble is bursting. We saw it coming in the data. We did a study a year ago when the hype was really at its peak to understand what AI spend was happening. And we looked at AI stakeholders. So these were companies developing AI tools or people deploying AI within their organizations or users of AI.
Yeah.
We did the study again just a couple months ago, and it was dramatically different. And as you pointed out, one of the top statistics was a year ago, 93% of the companies planned to increase the spend. Now that's down by a third. And those concerns about costs are way up. And it's consistent across the board. Whether you look at it by country or industry or functional area, everybody is ratcheting back. Now, 2/3 planning to increase spend is still a heck of a number. So it's not like it's going away.
Yeah, that's not like it's completely shut off. Like there's still a lot of money heading towards AI. But that surprising stat is that, I think some of the chief financial officers out there or some of the people that are looking at the money are going, okay, wait, hold on here. We can't just be handing out money hand over fist, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, in the spirit of having watched the Olympics now for a couple of weeks, if you look at it by country, a year ago, companies in India and China, 100% of them planned to increase spend. Now that's down below 50%. That was an astounding drop off. And the US now is at the top of the list in terms of planned spending, still right up around 70%. And it's maybe because we got a little bit of a slower start, or maybe because we're being more thoughtful about how we're doing that spending.
Right. There was another stat in the survey that showed only 1 in 4 companies have successfully launched AI initiatives. And there was also a Gartner report recently about they were saying that 1 out of 3 AI projects will eventually either fail or just be halted. So when you combine those two, do you look at why the other, 75% of companies are holding off on projects? What are some of the reasons that they're slowing to move beyond some of these pilot programs? There's a couple of reasons that you discovered, right?
Yeah, exactly. And our findings and the Gartner findings align pretty well, because it's only 1 in 4 of the launched initiatives have actually reached production, which means 75% of the AI initiatives have either stalled out or failed, or, this is the most interesting part to me, is they get to the end and there's this fear of being a headline, right? I mean, you could be right 99.9% of the time, but you provide one insulting answer or one offensive answer, or one time when your product or your site recommends a competitor's product. Now you've that one time out of a million is what gets remembered.
Yeah.
And companies have seen those headlines. They've seen the embarrassment at those organizations, and the risk reward equation is just not there yet. We have several clients where we've done all the proof of concept work. We've done the pilot, we've done the QA, and it comes time to throw that switch into production. And they're like, well, let's just wait a little bit. Let's do a little more testing. Let's wait and see what happens. And so there's the ones that have just purely failed in development and haven't delivered at all. There's the ones that have got too close to production but haven't fully met the objectives of the project.
Yeah.
And then there's the ones that just, well, we're not going to do it. We're not ready yet.
Yeah.
So,
could that lead to a fear of, we used to call this analysis paralysis, where you're giving your decision maker so much information, but you're giving them a list of pros and cons on both sides, and then they don't know what to do, and they just be like, well, it's probably safer just to not do anything rather than push that button and be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will also say we're seeing a very clear differentiation between internally focused projects and market focused projects. So of that statistic that only 1 in 4 have actually gotten to production, it's only 1 in 8 of externally focused projects.
Right. So they're even, yeah. And that makes sense. It feels like you don't want to, it's okay if you screw up internally, I guess, with some of these projects. Yeah. But depending on what the mess up is. But yeah, it feels like it's easier to fail on the internal team because you can make sure that doesn't get out to the press, right?
Yeah, exactly. If it works slowly, if it hallucinates, if there's some slight security issue and it only impacts your employee base, that's bad, but it's not as embarrassing.
Yeah.
But if you do something wrong that the market sees, that your competitors can take advantage of, or that offends your customers. So yeah, we're seeing more like 1 in 3 of the internally facing projects come to fruition. But another concerning thing to us was only about 1 in 3 companies have put in place the governance initiatives, standardizing models, defining who can use certain tools, putting in place a steering committee, requiring a business case. So there's still a long way to go in the basic blocking and tackling of governance and discipline around these tools.
Are a lot of those companies required to do this, or is it more of a best practice type of scenario that you're seeing?
Varies by industry.
Yeah.
So in the financial services, healthcare, government space, they're typically required to do these things, which you would hope they would do. In more of the retail and hospitality space, it's a smart thing to do, but it's not a required thing to do.
Yeah. As you see this, the money starting to dry up a little bit, do you think that companies might be afraid of throwing more money at the issue? There's that old phrase, throwing bad money after bad money. Do you get that sense that like maybe people feel like, well, AI is too big to fail? I think someone told me that the other day, and I laughed when they were like, no, it can fail. So is there a fear of like, well, I don't know if I want to spend another $1 million on this project because we still don't know if it's going to work, even if we throw more money at it?
There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
The bigger thing I see is a huge gap between what the original expectations were for how much these tools would cost and what they're turning out to cost in reality.
Yeah.
I think back a year ago, we all got access to ChatGPT or the Google tools or the Llama tools, and we did things on the system, and it was fun and it was free, or at most, $19 a month. Individually, not very expensive. Now you put it in a corporate enterprise environment, and these costs go through the roof. And we've seen companies spend millions that hadn't expected to spend that at all.
Yeah.
We've seen companies realize, a couple months into an initiative that's going to cost 10 or 20 or 100 times what the original expectation was. And so now they're looking at it and saying, not only is it throwing bad money after bad, but it's throwing a lot more money than they originally thought they would have to spend on these tools.
Well, yeah, but a lot of companies have experienced this in this whole SaaS world, right? The software as a service. If they don't have a handle on that spending, if they're allowing all of the business unit leaders to basically pull out their credit card and just swipe it, there's a lot of companies that are experiencing that because you're now putting it as an expense rather than as a I don't say capital purchase, but maybe an OpEx purchase, right? that goes through a procurement process and everything like that.
Yeah, while that could be a little opaque in how you're charged, it was a science project for us to figure out the true costs of these large language models. They charge by the query, they charge by the character, they charge by the token, they charge for inputs, they charge for outputs. If you're going to host it yourself, is it on a CPU? Is it on a GPU? It is nearly impossible to figure out what is going to cost you to use these tools until you get the bill for having used them. And that's a really scary thought for any financial executive, and certainly ought to be frightening to any tech executive.
It reminds me of the early days of the iPod when Apple had, it was like 99 cents a song, or the 99 cents an app, and then most parents got that bill a month later and noticed that their kids were charging all this stuff on that credit card. It's a similar analogy, I guess, for a lot of these companies that get that bill and they go,
yeah, what is this?
Yeah.
Well, we had no idea we were going to spend this much. We thought it was free.
Right, and that's one of the hidden costs that I think a lot of companies aren't realizing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is, it's not just the LLM, it's not just the large language model. To make a generative AI solution work, there's all kinds of upstream and downstream technologies and requirements and controls, and all of those cost money.
Right. Especially if, what are some of these other costs, like cloud costs? What other things are upstream or downstream would a company have to worry about?
Well, it goes to how the LLMs have evolved in their usage. So originally the thought was, hey, I've got a large language model, I'll deploy it, it'll answer all my questions, and everybody can be more efficient. And then we realized, of course, oh my gosh, there's security concerns. We can't just turn these things loose. So then you had to put in place the controls around security and maybe host a model yourself instead of using something publicly available. And then, in order to eliminate hallucinations, you had to use your own data, a retrieval augmented generation approach. So then you had to still have your own database and your own embeddings model, and that cost money. And then once you did that, if you didn't put the access controls in place, everybody in the company could see everybody else's information. Then you had to put that in place. So all of a sudden, the simple tool that was going to solve world hunger becomes this overall solution that has all of these elements to it, that each has an expense and each has time and effort and resources required to make it all work.
Yeah, you brought up hallucinations. I want to bring it back to that discussion for a second.
Sure.
But, most of the people we've talked about AI have said, and they've all agreed, that you're never going to be able to get rid of hallucinations 100%. You're never going to reach that 100% accuracy number. And so it becomes an issue of, well, what is acceptable? We've talked about this on the show in the drive-through space, for example, with ordering voice AI. How much acceptable bad orders are you going to get, or frustrations, before you become a TikTok meme? And so everyone in their brain should have a number of what the acceptable level of accuracy is on any AI, understanding that you're never going to get to 100. If anybody still out there thinks that it's going to be 100%, then they're fooling themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so what do the IT folks or the people that are making that decision about whether to push that button or not, because they're concerned about hallucinations, what do they need to do to get to either an acceptable level or pick a number, right?
Well, the first thing is consider the use case.
Yeah.
Again, internal versus external. Be more forgiving if it hallucinates and nobody sees it externally. The second consideration is industry, right? You can hallucinate more in retail than you could in healthcare or financial services. But the good news is the tools are getting better at controlling hallucinations. The big solution or step forward was retrieval augmented generation, where instead of asking a commercial LLM a question, and they have access to all the information in the world,
right,
and can hallucinate about anything, if you're giving it your own data, then presumably if it's pulling from your own database, it's going to be accurate most of the time, because your own data is accurate and restrictive. You're not going to recommend a competitor's product if it's pulling from your product catalog. You're not going to say something offensive if it's pulling from your own FAQs for customer service.
Yeah.
And then the other part of that is using multiple models that sort of check themselves And so it's additional layers of accuracy. So if the first model is 99% accurate and you build in another checkpoint and that's 99% accurate, and then even a third checkpoint, that's 99% accurate, now you've really diminished the likelihood of hallucination.
Yeah.
But you've also added 3 times the time to respond. So now, how long is someone waiting for a response? A customer is not going to wait more than a couple seconds.
Right. So you've got to balance that out as well. You brought up, Mike, the issue of the internal versus external thing, and I'm wondering if a lot of companies are even exploring this internal hallucination issue. Maybe because we don't hear about it as much, because you're never going to get headlines about an internal one. But are the companies that you're working with, are they aware of the issue of maybe releasing data that they don't want to, like, the CEO salary, for example, or some other private information that might get leaked to employees?
They are now.
Yeah.
I had an interesting experience.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. A year ago, we had one of our clients call us and say, hey, we just had a sales presentation from one of the big commercial LLM people, and we think we could replace everything LucidWorks does with this LLM. I was like, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, it can answer all the questions. I'm like, oh, so you want every employee to see the CEO's salary? No. You want every employee to be able to see all the costs and the margin of every client? Like, no. Like, well, you realize that's what these tools will do if you don't put the access controls and the security trimmings in place. So a year ago, we were kind of uninformed of that as a risk. But the good news is, as people have learned what these tools have done, or they've seen these kind of stories happen, they've become much more sensitive to the issue.
Another question I had was about the types of projects that a lot of these companies are doing. There's still an assumption from the people I've talked to on other episodes, and when we do analysis of the news events, for other shows, that it feels like a lot of the companies are still going after that low-hanging fruit. I probably overuse this term too much, but these are the easy projects. These are the pilot projects. These are the ones to see whether there is value in generative AI or within an LLM. We're not seeing the big world-changing, disruptive projects yet. So there's a balance between, you're describing the hype of the technology, it's up here, but the value you're getting is only down here because you've picked that easy project. So, could that be a problem if companies start pulling back because they're not happy with the easy projects? Like, we might never get to those solving world hunger problems or, changing the face of medical health, right?
Yeah, it's hard to build the business case for that bigger initiative if you don't know what it's going to cost and you can't quantify the benefits, and then you can't build an ROI model. And going back to your very first question about the costs of these tools and the hype cycle, you and I have been around long enough. We've seen it with ERP, we've seen it with CRM, we've seen it with the internet. First, everybody just wants it because it's the cool new thing. And then they start to ask, am I getting a return on this? And we're starting to get to that point on generative AI and these tools in general. And it's hard to build a business case for some of these things because there's not a database to pull good, viable statistics from. So they are still doing the low-hanging fruit kind of projects. The most common use case is code generation, synthetic data creation, QA of existing computer code. Obviously, it's the tech people using the tech tools in their environment. Then we're starting to see it be more deployed in the HR space, helping write job descriptions, helping screen resumes, helping do performance reviews. But the big payback areas in growth, in major supply chain initiatives, those are few and far between at this point.
Do you think we'll ever get to that phase if the money dries up, or what do you think might have to happen? Because I can't imagine another layer of hype behind. It's going to have to be driven by the business more than or the business leaders more than the vendors, right?
Well,
or is it a mixture of both?
But the vendors, but different vendors. So here's what was happening, and here's what I'm hearing from key executives. Originally, the thought was, let me go get a generative AI tool to do generative AI things.
Okay.
Now we're realizing that the traditional software providers, CRM, ERP, finance and accounting systems, are building these tools into their software. So you no longer need to go do something special or different or one-off. Salesforce.com is running all these commercials now about their tools. The ERP systems have it in there. The CRM systems have it in there. So the vendors are going to bring the tools to their customers as an implicit part of their software. And that's what, when I've done these sessions with small groups of executives and CIOs and CTOs, that's what they're all saying is, hey, if I can stall my CEO and my board long enough, eventually I will get these tools from my software vendors.
But that's a really hard thing to do when you've got the CEO and everybody else going, AI, we need it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, my own experiences. I mean, a year ago when LucidWorks was sort of a search company, I wasn't on any podcasts. I didn't have anybody asking for interviews. I wasn't getting quoted in any magazines. I wasn't keynoting any presentations. All of a sudden, generative AI comes out. We're a search and AI company, and everybody wants to talk about it because it's of interest to the board. It's of interest to the CEO. It's of interest to the C-suite.
Right.
But they're also watching these podcasts. They're also hearing about the bubble bursting. They're reading the data, and they're starting to say, yeah, let's slow down a little bit.
I'm starting to wonder if I'm part of the problem, Mike.
Well, we all were. I mean, I bought into it too. A year ago, I was like, this stuff is going to be great. And it's going to change the world. And we all learn.
So, and I've asked a lot of this of other guests on the show too, where it felt like to me that AI was always given a longer leash by the financial folks, that they were like, you could start to see ripples of, maybe we've hyped this up too much, but then, that faucet kept on flowing. So I now feel like we're in a situation like finally, we're getting some pushback from the financial folks. At least it feels like this, that they are paying attention to those bills and they are paying attention to this. Hey, wait a second, maybe we did fall for some of this hype. So, do you feel like, well, maybe this was just a natural cycle and they did get a longer leash, but they're certainly not going to continue to get that.
I think it was an exaggerated natural cycle, and meaning, again, all technologies, the exciting stuff goes through a hype phase. I think the difference is we all as individuals could feel it, touch it, see it, right? When you roll out a new CRM system, you're not at home trying out the new CRM system. We were all at home trying out DALL-E, ChatGPT. So it got compounded by the fact that everybody can see it, feel it, touch it, and see the excitement. But to your point about being driven, we do a lot of work with companies that are owned by private equity firms. There were literally private equity firms sending out edicts that you must be deploying generative AI in your company somewhere this quarter. And, when your owners are forcing you to do that, you're not developing a business case. You're not doing a financial justification. You just want to have a presentation in 3 months back to the private equity owners that say, here's what we've deployed. Well, so compound that.
There's a funny stat in your survey here that says this, that a third of the business leaders that you asked still feel like they're falling behind competitors, even despite everybody else is struggling to implement the AI. So there's still this fear of missing out, or FOMO, right? That's going on of like, I see that we're pulling back. I see that it's costing a lot of money, but God, I got to have that hit, or I've got to, I've still got to get that project out. Like that wouldn't that drive everybody crazy in the company? Like if you started saying that to all of your employees, like, listen, we're going to cut back, but God, we've got to have this. Like, it's like, what message do you want to send?
I think I've used those exact words. Don't do too much, but make sure you're doing something.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely that FOMO thing that everybody thinks everybody else is having more sex than they are, right? They see the headlines. I mean, until recently, until podcasts like yourselves started talking about the bubble bursting and the hype, it was always about this is going to be the next great thing that everybody's getting the benefits that, no one's going out there and talking about the failures, they're talking about the success stories. So everybody looked at that and said, wow, it's working for everybody else. Why isn't it working for us? Now folks are starting to realize it's not that easy. It's not delivering these results that people are hyping up, and it's going to take longer. We'll get there. We'll get there over time, but not right away.
So if you're watching this as a viewer, if you're looking at this issue, and you start seeing all of these people that are talking about a bubble bursting and a pullback, and maybe you shouldn't spend all of your money on these AI projects, and you're still in the middle of your project. If you're a company and you're like, well, we haven't even deployed yet, what do I do? Do I throw my hands up in the air and go, all right, I'm going to immediately cancel this so that I don't get fired for wasting the company's money? Or, what do I need to do as a IT leader in this space and so that I don't get fired? Like what good advice do you have for people? Like, take a step back, take a deep breath. It's not the end of the world if the bubble does burst, but there are some ramifications of if this does happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every company should continue to investigate these tools and learn from their early deployments and then figure out how to go bigger. The first step is governance. Back to some rules to make sure these tools aren't abused, to make sure they don't make embarrassing mistakes. That is things like specifying a standard set of models, putting in place a process to get approvals for deploying these tools, train your folks on how to use them, a steering committee, and then most importantly, before deploying these tools, a business case. Think about it like any other capital investment. You wouldn't buy a new machine or build a new factory or even buy a new software system without some financial justification. And the same thing is true in terms of these generative AI tools.
Yeah.
Try to get a good estimate of cost and then an estimate of what the benefit's going to be.
I want to ask you I want to have you put your prediction hat on. Yeah. Because there's a couple of predictions I want you to make. One would be, if you were, when you do this survey next year or the next time you ask people about their spending habits on AI, do you think that money is going to continue to dry up or completely dry up, or maybe it'll come back on as companies realize if they get smarter about the investments they're making in this technology?
It won't dry up.
Yeah.
The benefits are definitely there, but I think they will become more deliberate in their decisions, and it'll be less of a shotgun approach and more of a rifle. We're going to do these things because there's benefit. One of the things that the industry has to do is make it clearer how to price these things. Right now it's tokens. Everybody's pricing on tokens. Well, what the hell is a token? It's not a word. It's not a sentence. A sentence might be 4 tokens, a page might be 200 tokens, a product manual might be 10,000 tokens. It's like buying a house based on the number of 2x4s in the wall. I mean, who the hell knows?
Yeah.
So they've got to get clearer on that in order to enable the financial people and companies to understand what they're going to spend. So I think that's a precursor to being able to make a good business decision.
Yeah, how does that shake out? Who does the clients tell the AI companies like this pricing is whack and you need to do something else, or will the companies come around and going, yeah, we were just guessing, so here's our new pricing model? Because again, wasn't that the shift when everybody went to the cloud? Nobody knew, whether Microsoft charging per software copy versus cloud instance, right? Or the subscription model became, born out of that, right?
I think competitive pressure will sort it out. Competitive pressure from the open source models will certainly help both bring down cost and force the commercial tools to become more clear about how they charge. Now, the open source models can be a little confusing too, because even though the model itself is open source, you still have to have the compute power to run it. And do you need a CPU? Do you need a GPU? Do you need 10 GPUs? But at least there, the increment of expense is pretty clear. It's the compute power. And so that'll force the commercial models to become clear. And then somebody who prices it more directly will force the other competitors to adopt that model.
Yeah. So the other prediction thing I wanted to ask you was, do you foresee a lot of these companies moving forward? They're going to be doing small projects and more of these projects that they don't necessarily think will fail as much, and you're going to get some real value out of it, but the hype about it is not going to be that exciting. It's going to be things that most people don't even realize that AI is doing, rather than some big flashy, hey, this will make you coffee.
Yeah, it's a 5% improvement or a 10% improvement in something that they're doing today. We experienced that ourselves when we looked at using generative AI tools to help improve performance of prospecting, our messaging out to potential sales targets, and we A/B tested manual versions versus different generative AI tools, and we found that the best increased our open rate by about 5%. That's significant, but it's not world changing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we'll see in most of these areas. And also, it didn't replace the people who were doing that already.
Right.
So, a year ago, the biggest concern in our study was job displacement. Everybody was worried about losing their jobs. And a year later, that concern hasn't changed at all. All those other concerns have increased dramatically because folks have realized AI is not going to replace them. AI is going to make them more productive.
Right. But there's even some questions about how productive are these tools going to make someone? Because I think there's been some surveys about employees be like, we don't know how to become more productive with these tools because they're not great, or they're not as good as what they were promised to be. So that's another kind of challenge for companies too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where I've seen the difference, and I don't have data behind this is just pure anecdote and experience, but it's the top-down versus the bottom-up. The top-down mandates become those dysfunctional use cases where, oh my gosh, I've got to deploy this because my boss or my boss's boss wants to see it, and I'll find a way to make it visible. But it may not make me more productive. It probably makes me less productive, but I've got to do it.
Yeah.
The bottom-up, where the employees say, hey, let me try this, see if it makes my life easier. If it's easier to write messaging, to create content, to evaluate RFPs, and then they use it again because it added value. Those are the things that will cause it to become adopted and propagate within an organization. But that takes longer, right? Because that's grassroots. It's 1,000 people trying it and 100 of them liking it, 10 people using it versus the CEO saying, everybody must go forward and use this.
All right. So, Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot since you are the CEO of a company. What approach are you taking at your company, at Lucidworks? Do you allow all the employees to basically try or look for new tools, or do you give them that top-down mandate?
Well, I like to have fun, and I like to tap into people's competitive spirits. So we actually did something we called Llama-Palooza, which was we ran a competition. So you didn't have to use the tools, but if you use the tools, you could win prizes and money.
Okay.
So what we did was we said, okay, we're going to run a competition, form up little teams of folks, and deploy a generative AI model in your work area if you want. And then we're going to do a competition and present it back to the executive team. The winning team got to present to the board. I'm not sure that was a prize or a punishment, but like a third of the company deployed these tools, and we had fun doing it. And then the same way it's kind of a soft mandate to my executive team. I've said to all the C-suite executives, you need to be using these tools in your area. Encourage your people to try them and find out what works.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to bonus you or penalize you, but it's something we should be doing as a company. And it wasn't a hard sell. We're a tech company to start with.
Right.
So
that reminds me of a joke that a former boss of mine said. We were at an event and we said that first prize was a copy of Windows 8, and second prize was 2 copies of Windows 8. So.
Yeah.
And those of us in the know will know what that means. Rich, or not Rich, Mike, one last question for you. What are those little buttons on the back of that wall for, you've got a map on are those places you've been, or are those just, are those potential sales contacts?
Those are poker chips.
Oh, poker chips. Okay.
I'm a bad amateur poker player, and everywhere I go that I can get into a good poker game,
oh, nice.
I will get a souvenir chip or 2, and those are different poker chips from all the places around the world I've lost money, and then there's a lot more that don't fit on the map. So that may be the most expensive piece of art any of us owns, because each one of those chips represents probably $1,000 of loss.
I just wanted to make sure that you weren't inadvertently leaking any sales data or prospects for the company. I wanted to make sure we were okay there.
No, this is all just personal enjoyment.
All right, cool. Mike Sinaway, thanks again for joining us on the show. Some great stuff here about the future of AI.
All right, Keith, my pleasure.
That's all the time we have for today's episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.